Gary, it's probably fair to say, you did say when you were inducted in the Hall of Fame, you said it all started with really a good stallion. We had Centane, and he helped you get up to Waikato. But at the end of the day, was it O'Reilly that kept you expanding such a powerful operation that is Waikato Stud?
Oh, well, all of us need a good stallion, and he certainly was a delight to have. And you saw Tony O'Reilly, and then most of you won't know that don't follow rugby. He was a world-class winger. He could run very fast. He was extremely good-looking. All the girls in New Zealand followed him all over the place. And, of course, he was a tycoon, so O'Reilly was my last tycoon. Irish lass featured in the pedigree, so we put all the things together and called him O'Reilly. And he could run, he was good-looking, and he got more girlfriends than Tony.
Aptly named in many ways, wasn't he, really? Right from day one, you knew you had something pretty special because you're out of a golden slipper winner after all, but at the end of the day, things weren't quite right at the start, were they?
No, you don't actually know that. To be fair, Patrick Hogan, David Benjamin and Joe Walsh and I travelled the world in August of that year looking for sire prospects, and he was a yearling, and I came home and said to Mark, we were sort of hoping we'd get 400,000 or 500,000 for him as a yearling, and I said, well, that was about £150,000, so you go to England with £150,000, well, Chris Waller spends more than that in slow bloody stayers, to be honest. So I said to Mark, we really shouldn't be selling the horse. So, yeah, a series of circumstances arose, and we didn't sell him. But we weren't that unhappy. We were unhappy at the time because, it's all about your ego. You think you'd like to be one of the top sellers in the sale, but on the other hand, we were pleased to have him, and we sent him across to Gerald Ryan originally, and Gerald worked him as a 2-year-old with a horse called Paint, who was then a 3-year-old. He buried Paint in the track work, and I got a call from Melbourne to say from somebody they'd like to buy into the horse. So I rang Henry Plumtree, who actually was responsible for the mating. Henry actually was involved with Elders Finance at the time, and Courts was tied up in some, well, we won't go into that financial ramifications with over there. So he suggested that Courtser and Tasoldi, who were 2 mares we bought on the Waikato Stud deal, were mated over there, one to Moscow and one to Last Tycoon. That's how he came about. So I rang Henry and I said, we've had this offer for the horse, go down the track and watch him work. So he rang me a couple of days later and said, you'd be very silly to sell him. Then within, a couple of days, Mark, wasn't it, we got a call to say that he'd taken fight at the track, he'd stepped backwards in a bit of a indentation, thrown himself over backwards, torn all the ligaments in his hind quarters, and John Maher was there at the time and said that he thought they'd put him down. So we got him home, we walked him, we had chiropractors, and we walked him and did all those things for ages. And Dave O'Sullivan, you here, Dave? Yes, right here. Yeah, Dave, I didn't notice you. Stand up. So, Dave knew we wanted to race him in Australia, so he came out one day and said, look, I know you want to race him in Australia, but I'll put him through the processes. And he said in the van on the way over tonight, he said, it's the only horse I've offered to pre-train. Anyway, he went to Dave, and the rest is history. He won his first, and then he won his second, then he won the Bayer, and then the only thing I will say is that before he went to the Telegraph, Dave didn't come down, but he said nothing will beat him. So I'm standing in the bird cage, and I'm looking at him. You know when you look at all the opposites and how they grow a hand? And nothing did beat him, so it was great.
Let's go to Dave. That's a good way to come to you, Dave. And I mean, when you saw something special in this horse right from the word go, because I remember having a chat with you at Trentham that day, and you said he's going to be very, very hard to beat, and I think we've got it on record as well. And look, he was one of the special horses in your stable, wasn't he?
Well, he really was. As Gary has said, I offered to pre-train him for him because I felt a little bit guilty that the first reason why Gary didn't sell him was the fact that I had him vetted, and my vet didn't pass him, which was stupid. But so Gary decided, and being Gary, said, well, if he won't, I'll pull him out, which he did, and so the rest is history. But when he was injured, I said to Gary, well, look, if you want to send him back to Australia, I'll pre-train him, see how he stands up to his work, and if he can stand up to his work, then you can sort of send him back. But then all of a sudden I woke up how good he was, So the story changed a bit from there.
You weren't letting this horse out of your sight, were you, Dave?
I sort of felt, well, no, Gary, I think he's far better off in New Zealand. So that's how it all happened.
He only had a handful of starts, but he did it all, didn't he?
Oh, he was an amazing sprinter. I mean, as you know, I've trained a lot of very, very good horses, but he was the most untapped horse I ever trained. We never saw a fraction of what he was capable of doing.
He would have been a horse that would have been able to measure up, and Mr. Tiz did this. He would have been the sort of horse that would have certainly measured up against the very best in Australia had he stayed sound.
No doubt at all.
And from Davey, who's inducted, to Mark. Mark, it was a good segue, wasn't it, really, having Chris Waller up here, because you've got O'Reilly's favourite son at start at the moment, and Sacred Falls.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's really exciting. We always wanted to stand as best son, and as we all know, very close to us, and it takes a champion to leave a champion, as we all do know. And so, yeah, really exciting. It's another chapter, and he's just had a wonderful sale, so there's lots to look forward to.
Just getting back to O'Reilly towards the end, he looked as fit as a fiddle with the last few times I did see the horse as well, and he had that sort of aura about him, didn't he? He was really the king, wasn't he, at Waikato Stud? He knew it.
Yeah, he certainly was. He had a hell of a lot of character about him, and he knew that he ruled the place. And it was a sad old day that we found him, but it was a very quick ending, and thankfully for that.
All right, and Sacred Falls, you're happy with the way things went with with O'Reilly's son at the sales?
Couldn't be happier.
Yeah, good man. Ladies and gentlemen, a super horse, trained by a superman, owned by a great stud, Waikato Stud. Ladies and gentlemen, O'Reilly.